Hi, Kiana, so much for joining us. We're happy to have you.
Hi, Allison. It's nice to be here. I'm glad that we're talking.
So, before we get into your paper is entitled Responsible AI in the Global Context Maturity Model and Survey. Before we get into the details of that, I just want to talk about a little bit about your journey. Your background is not just in AI/ML. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into this space.
Yes, absolutely. So I started with actually my bachelor degrees is industrial engineering. Industrial engineering is mostly like operations research and working in manufacturing sites. So after my bachelor degree, I went to work. I kind of thought that, okay, I'm really interested in this, but mostly in system analysis part of it. And I want to do more research. Let's go to grad school. So I went to grad school, uh, and this time in systems engineering. So in systems engineering, it has all the aspects of what my background is in industrial engineering, but also has the elements of more of computer science, statistical analysis to it. So I got really interested in that. Again, after my master's degree, I went to work for a big company, but this time in IT department. When I was doing my PhD, I tried to focus on human agent teaming, how they can collaborate, and the overarching goal for this collaboration or teaming would be how AI and ML can augment human decision making, basically, and can help us with a different type of tasks while considering all the values and ethical aspects of society.
Interesting. So, and now in this paper, we're talking about organizations' adoption of AI. So tell us a little bit about the motivation for this work in particular.
Yes. So there were like kind of multiple motivation for this paper. One was just like addressing a knowledge gap to be able to systematically review how responsible AI adoption measures and understanding varies across organizations, but also we could offer a framework for assessing responsible AI practices and potentially figure out what are the barriers that organizations face when trying to implement these practices. And of course, we are also hoping that this paper and the results could inform policymakers and those who are like developing standards to just get an idea of what is happening and what are the challenges, biases, everything that is going on within the organizations.
And responsible AI, it's a term that we hear a lot. So I think starting with the basics, how should we define responsible AI?
Right. I think there are two things, two separate answers that probably I'm going to give you throughout our talk. Is that one is that it is stated in the paper and it is, let's say, supported by the evidence that we got. The other part is just my personal opinion that, yeah, that it is not
Okay, we'll take both.
particularly, yeah, it's not particularly supported by evidence, but I just like from talking to people and understanding it, through other kind of like research. So in this particular paper, responsible AI and the definition that we used was used by European Commission framework.
Yeah.
So they have this definition of responsible AI that goes to system level principles such as reliability, privacy, human interactions, transparency, societal well-being, fairness, and accountability. What we added to that was organizational dimensions, like governance frameworks, leadership, cultures, etc. So that was what we contributed to the definition to make it more comprehensive. However, I think in general, my own opinion is that even the definition of responsible AI is a little bit vague. So even if we go into different like papers from literature, from academia, policy making, etc., you could find different elements to it. There is not a unique definition between everyone that we are like using, but there are certain elements that are mutual across all, which is ethical, safe, accountability, transparency, privacy, being inclusive toward diverse population, and also being reliable. So these are the things that are across all the sectors, but I think there should be an effort to make it more concrete and that we can all be able to use that definition and standard.
Right. Now, you open the paper stating, I'm just going to read a little bit, the need for understanding RAI adoption on a company level is increasingly important. Can you elaborate a little bit on this problem space? Why is, in your opinion, why is that need so poignant right now?
I think across the organization it is important because we want to recognize the weaknesses, and these weaknesses can lead to AI related harms, like for example bias, discrimination, privacy breaches, and that could have very big societal consequences, right? And also I think across certain industries, like for example um, healthcare, finance, transportation, the potential risk could be much more, you know, just like you can feel it more in the kind of in the society, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And also, I think the regulatory landscape is evolving, right? So, as these new laws and frameworks emerging globally, we want to make sure that how they are being implemented within the organizations. And also, I think investors, end user, customers, their expectations are also, growing around ethical AI and responsible AI practices. So we want to know how we can also accommodate that in the within the organizations and also at system level.
Okay, so what does it look like then if a company has adopted or an organization has adopted responsible or AI?
Right. So from the perspective of this study that we did, so we would say that responsible AI adoption has happened if both organizational and systems level mitigation measures, including governance structure, risk measurements, frameworks, technical mitigation at the model level has happened. And also, there is an ongoing development and optimization of the processes, as well as continuous training of the employees. So if we have that, then we could say, okay, we reached the maturity level that is optimized. But just like I think from my own perspective, responsible AI, when it is adopted, typically demonstrate kind of like formal structure for responsible AI, and they document their policies and principles. They have cross-functional involvement that is very important. And also there is a commitment not only on the higher level management, but also employees of maintaining this responsibility toward use of AI and ML models. Basically, if there is an ethics committee or responsible AI committee in the organization, they have enough leverage and power within the organization to audit the practices continuously.
I'm excited to get into your approach and the survey methodology. Before we do, just want to get an understanding, what did you set out to uncover?
The survey in this paper that we did are from like 1,000 companies. All of them have revenues of $500 million and above per year. So these are not medium-sized companies. So we wanted to know in that size companies that have probably the means to implement such practices, what is happening on the organizational level and system level, what are the frameworks if the top management is ready to accept these practices, and also when it comes down to implementing, uh, if there is a gap or not.
Okay. Some of the gaps in what's been done before, you kind of stated maybe they're more policy centric. Are there other
Mm-hmm.
gaps to the previous approaches to something like this?
Yes. So, for example, one of the things that we noticed that is sometimes there is unclear scoring methods.
Yeah.
And sometimes the questions that they're asking are not very well defined, and most of them are focused on system level. In general, sometimes there is lack of transparency in the methodology that they've used to score the system.
You make a distinction between system level and organizational level. So, how should we understand those two things?
Right. So system level mostly refers to implementation and technical measures to mitigate a specific AI risk. For example, bias testing, explainability tools, etc. And organizational maturity basically refers to if we have the processes, the structures, and the culture that supports responsible AI adoption. For example, for organizational part, if the organization have a training and awareness programs, how much stakeholder engage with the mechanisms, and if there is incident response capabilities within the organizations. Going back to system levels, maybe some of the examples would be if there is monitoring and development and maintenance of the models that are already deployed. Are there any technical safeguards and control within the systems? Also, testing and validation methodologies for individual models and applications. So that's kind of like, let's say, the difference between these two dimensions of RAI.
Okay. I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but it sounds to me if, like, organizational level, you could have it on paper that you have processes and procedures in place, but how do you know that they're really being carried out? Is that something that you've noticed in your findings, or?
Yes, so actually, that is a very interesting point that you mentioned. So it is like you said, it is easy to have it on paper that we have like a structure, or we have, we accepted RAI practices. See, we have like, I don't know, like once a month, a training session. We care about this. But when it comes down to actually implementing it uh, into system level, making it operationalized, then that becomes challenging. And that is actually, let's say, like one of the biggest findings of the paper, that we see this gap, that it seems that organizations are ready to basically adopt RAI practices at an organizational level, but when it comes from up to down to make it actually happen, there are barriers there.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into them because there's some really kind of staggering and interesting results that you got out of the survey. Now, just out of curiosity, how did you select the organization? So there was a revenue metric. What
Right.
else?
For this survey, we used 1,000 organization. There was that revenue metric, as you mentioned. There are across 20 industries and 19
Great. Okay.
geographical regions, right? But I should also mention that, so since this survey was carried out by a third party company, because this is on a level that should be done with, through companies that are actually doing survey are, their job, because we wanted to ask this question from certain people that are either on C-level, or they are specifically experts of their company in responsible AI, or chief data scientists. So there, it needs a certain reach to be able to carry out this survey of this size. But also I need to mention that the sampling of the regions and industry and organizations are not in a way that we can make any, statistically significant conclusion of what is happening between regions or what happening, across industries, because the number of samples from each are not equal. Like, for example, we have more companies from North America than companies from, I don't know, like Middle East, for example. But again, it gives a good perspective what's happening around the world. But we cannot say anything concrete because the sampling was not based on regions or industries.
Okay. So you select the company, you use a third party to make sure you're talking to the
Mm-hmm.
appropriate stakeholders. After you survey them, you categorize the companies. Tell us a little bit more about sort of your methodology, your process to do something with the responses that you received from these organizations.
Um, right. So we try to remain consistent with our scoring system, right? So we divided the maturity into organizational and operational, and we defined level 1 through 5. Level 1 being at initial stage of the maturity, and level 5 being at the optimized level of maturity. So we had these levels, and then while we are asking questions about each of these dimensions, we designed the answers in a way that when, for example, choice 1 will be equivalent of being at initial phase of maturity in that dimension, and level 5 at optimized level. Then we scored based on that. So we tried to make it very simple and very straightforward, and also because transparency and being understandable of how we are scoring this maturity, what we were aiming for. So we try to make it that way, and that is how we scored the organizations.
All right, so let's get into the results. I'll let you first share whatever you want to share, and then I'll tell you what was interesting to me or what I want to talk more about.
Sure. So I think interesting result was that, well, you mentioned the most interesting one is that there is a gap between uh, maturity with respect to organizational dimension and operational dimension, which it is interesting to see. And again, what I'm saying is not statistically anything significant with or a causal inference, but I think this gap potentially could be related to talking about a thing, and actually implementing it is always difficult, right? So it is also the same in this domain, right? Just like having some principles and having some structures and notions on paper, that's different from to actually having a very concrete structure for safeguarding the models or mitigating risks across different systems in the organization. Could be like really a tough job to do.
Well, do you think that comes back to kind of the lack of the standardized evaluation method? Because if we're just looking for a process to exist, then to kind of check that box, then it doesn't really matter if anybody's doing it. But you get my point. Do you think that that's related at all, or just the difficulty of implementing something on on an organizational level, especially such a huge? You're looking at really big companies.
Yes. So what are the some of the interesting things that we actually noticed here was lack of talent, specifically in responsible AI domain. I think that could be one of the major, barriers from uh, making it happen from organization level to system level, that we need experts that know how to implement these practices and safeguards in the system level and make it operationalized. So I think maybe we need more people to be trained on this specific domain. Um, and I think this also opens up a very, um, great opportunity for us to include people from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, and different fields of expertise to come together and be trained for this particularly very important domain, especially with the emergence of generative AI and everything that is happening in a black box. We really need those people.
Okay. Now, you said that maybe we don't have the appropriate sampling for any kind of conclusions to be drawn across regions or industries. Is there anything you can say based on your results about the differences that you saw in either different industries or across different regions?
Yes, so again, we don't have the necessarily number of samples as supporting evidence to say that if North America and particularly in Asia, Singapore and Japan are doing better than the rest of the world. Uh, so in this survey, we show that, right? But we don't have the evidence to say that that is a fact, right? Because even from just like reading the news and being in the responsible AI domain and following everything that is happening around the board, uh, it it appears that Europe has actually more progress and have more regulatory practices and structures in this particular domain. Um, so I cannot state the facts that this is what it is, just like North America and Japan and Singapore is like ahead of everyone else. But what I can say is that it shows that all across the world, people are actually paying attention more.
Right.
So that's it. That's a good thing. And I think that's the only thing that I can mention. But from my own perspective, I would say actually maybe Europe is ahead of North America, but again, no evidence to support that.
Right. So you have a section about risk perception.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what you found there.
Yes. So interestingly enough, the risk perception showed almost like equal percentage for privacy, cybersecurity, and reliability. However, the risk perception was much lower when it came down to fairness, non-discrimination, and accountability, right? And that is what is stated as our findings in the paper. But going back to my personal opinion or what I think that is happening, in general patterns that we see in the risk perception is that I think technical experts often focus on different risks than business leaders. So that could be one. The other one is that privacy and bias concerns typically rank the highest in organizations that are have awareness programs or more training for employees. And the other thing that I think maybe we forget to mention is that long-term risks, people less attention to them, or it's just more obvious than immediate harm, right? Like data breach could happen anytime, like cybersecurity, but the bias and discrimination and accountability, they will happen in the long run. The other thing, for example, when they 51% mentioned that there are risk perceptions on privacy and data governance, right? That for me shows that organizations tend to focus on compliance risks mostly rather than ethical considerations per se. Um, and this, risk perceptions always also like evolving and changing after any particular incident or regulatory changes as well.
Right. Were you able to uncover some of the most common challenges that organizations face when they're trying to implement or adopt responsible AI practices?
One of them we mentioned was that insufficient talent, particularly in the area of human-centered design, and 32% of the organizations reported insufficient talent in that. And the other challenges was that there is a gap between planning and implementation and very vague responsibilities for risk management. So I think we need to, again, we repeat this a lot, but I think typically organization and at any level, even organization as like a family unit, right? The moving from principles to practical implementations is always challenging. Um, and another thing is that usually we want to like integrate these responsible AI processes into existing workflow, and there is always um, this notion that, oh, they're like slowing innovation, right?
Right.
And I think balancing these standards, local requirements, also the trade-off between innovation and, these practices and the legal system is always hard. But also, I think we need to have like meaningful metrics to track progress as well. For example, if we are going to do another survey in the future, what are the metrics that organizations at organizational level and system level they can use in order to document their progress? Because in this survey, we asked them 40 questions, right? So 40 questions cannot properly account for progress, even if it is like a tiny progress, but we cannot account for that. So that is really important.
So I'm wondering if you want to take a stab at that point, because it's not, I've heard it many times, is regulation is kind of the antithesis of innovation. You want to take a stab on where you stand on that balance between, does regulation curb innovation?
See, no, I don't think that's it. It's just a notion that, for me at least, that uh, is located here in Silicon Valley, which the culture is move fast and break things. Maybe that's their attitude. That is innovation and like be responsible doesn't go hand in hand. But I think we should change that saying into move fast and be responsible, right? Because you can do it, I'm sure. We just like need to have the infrastructure for it. And like you said, actually regulations and laws sometimes leads to innovation, right? So I'm coming from a background that is not from a very freedom type, which is like US equals to freedom, liberal, everyone can, have like innovation and everything. I don't come from that background. And from my own experience, just that limitations and regulations sometimes make people very, very creative and innovative. So no, I don't believe that regulations will curb innovations. That's not true.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I saw that in your paper. This isn't word for word, but companies developing the foundational models are seen as responsible for mitigating associated risks. compared to the organizations that are like using or building on these models. What are your thoughts on that division of responsibility?
Yes, so in the paper, 88% of the organization believe foundational model developers, not the end user, are responsible for mitigating AI risk. That perspective also like reflected on their operational maturity distribution, with many organizations like potentially hesitant to fully adopt mitigation measures due to unclear responsibilities, right? Um, but that's again what's in the paper, and I think the responsibility distribution between foundation model developers and the downstream users involves like many factors, right? Like for example, the developers have greater technical capabilities to addressing inherent model risks, while downstream users have better understanding of specifically deployment kind of context and risks. That's this practical ability to mitigate risks based on these kind of abilities that different sectors have make it like difficult for them to mitigate this, because there are different sets of transparency and customizability across the models for both of them. So that will make it difficult sometimes for both to list all the responsibilities. And one of the things about foundational model is that their providers set a baseline safety, but that baseline safety cannot always anticipate all the applications, right? So it could be good, bad, or very bad, but they cannot anticipate that. So they need to, I think, provide the downstream users with appropriate tools, documentation, and how to use the model responsibly in order to divide that responsibility across all.
Yeah, I would think it has to be some kind of shared responsibility
Mm-hmm.
model.
Yes. Oh,
So
that's a good idea for research. Shared responsibility model. Let's do it.
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
um, so talking about that, talking about the spreading the love when it comes to responsibility, what role do you think consumers and citizens play in holding organizations accountable and responsible for ethical AI?
Yes. Uh, that is also a very interesting question, and also that is basically what my idea of the perfect process of that regulation is, that it should come from the citizens and end users. If you demand it, you can get it as a regulation, but if you don't care about it, no one will take care about it, right? I think just like making informed choices about the product and services that you are using, or demanding transparency about, for example, this particular AI, how it's making decisions. I want to know more. And providing feedback if there is some problematic AI interaction. Now, in some areas, there are this, discussion with AI regulations people, and, public consultation, maybe participate in those every now and then. I think there should be also people advocating for digital rights and protections. And I think overall, let's say that we need to develop AI literacy to better understand the capabilities, but also their limitations. Um, so I think that would be the most important things, just like be educated about what you are using and what is the limitation of it. And if you're informed about that, then everyone, I think, will make better decisions.
What are the limitations of this study?
Oh, don't get me started.
Some of them.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, there's always like limitation to all of the studies, whether it is like very theoretical or like quantitative or qualitative, we need to make assumptions, right? But I think some of the major limitations of this publication is that we only looked at large companies,
Hmm.
right? We want to see smaller and medium-sized companies, how they are doing. And it would be really interesting to see since um, inserting something new into already established workflow is much more difficult than
Right.
establishing it from the beginning. So it would be interesting to see if the smaller, newer companies are more successful into operationalizing RAI practices or not. So that's kind of like one of the limitations. And also, I think inherently surveys have this type of subjective bias that they carry. It would be great if we could find some metrics that basically shows indirectly the progress toward organizational and operational maturity. And the other thing is that this field is evolving rapidly. And even when we are saying that, okay, this is like the framework, this is the maturity model, it might not be relevant in 6 months, right?
Right.
So I think one of the future work maybe should be how we come up with adaptive frameworks, right? So that could catch up with the speed of this changing kind of environment around AI.
Right. And that's my next question. So future work, so maybe adaptive frameworks, maybe some kind of shared responsibility model. Anything else that you're considering related to this
Um,
work?
yes, yes. So actually, I hope that for some of the industries that are the definition of risks carries a stronger, notion for them, we could specifically study those. So let's say industry-specific maturity models, like for example, healthcare, I think is one of the industries incorporating AI more and more into their practices. And it would be really interesting to see how, in that domain, RAI and maturity will shape up to be from the operational and organizational level.
Right. And what about for you outside of this work? Do you have any research coming out that we can look forward to or anything exciting coming up?
Yes, so I'm doing a lot of cool research at the moment, but one of the things that I'm really excited about, it's about how AI and agentic AI could be useful in aviation industry.
Mm.
That I'm, yeah. So I don't know if I mentioned or not, but I'm a postdoc at the Aeronautic and Astronautics department. So a lot of the applications that we are dealing with are related to aviation. So I'm very excited to um, study more, do more research on that, and um, hopefully uh, talk to you about it sometime
Yeah.
about the
What are
findings. Yes.
what are some of the, like, you don't have to go into anything that you're not ready to share yet, but what are some of the applications of AI in that space that people are like tossing around right now?
Right, right. So I think that the most like obvious application would be a lot of incidents that happen in aviation industry, commercial, flights is due to human error, right?
Right.
So how can AI assistant tools and AI decision tools can help mitigate that. And also one of the other application of it that I think could be helpful in many industries in training and education.
Mm.
So, for example, if you have like a AI advisor, AI like assistant, co-pilot, how it would help you with the training process. So I think those are the two things that um, are very interesting to see how it evolve over time.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I'm excited to see what comes out next. Thank you, Kiana, for joining us. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Allison.